Hello, everyone. This is Masood, your host at Allah's Narrative, and we have Trey Bishop today to chat about Quran and textual imitation. So, welcome, Trey Bishop, and
Hello.
yeah, salam to you as well. And we were about discussing something about how the Quran brings information, and when it is speaking to its audience, it makes an assumption that the audience know about the stories that it is communicating, right? So I said to you, it's quite not the case. Some of it is, it's the answer is yes and no, and the Quran does things in a very unique way. It tells. So you said, then I told you that I will come up with some examples, right, to show you, if you remember that. Yeah,
Yeah, what did you find?
yeah. I'm gonna show you a few examples, like what I meant by that. Mhm. Okay, so let me share here. Mm, Like, for example, you can see here in verse 49 where the Quran tells, O Muhammad, this is news of the unseen that we relate to you. You and your people did not know it beforehand, right? So be patient. The final outcome will be in favor of those mindful of God, right? Now, this is the story of Noah, right? So you can ask me, or one can ask, oh, well, Noah's story was very popular at that time because it's in all of those books, apocryphal, canon. It's in the gospel. Gospel makes references to Noah, and obviously, it's in all of the Hebrew sources and even the apocryphal sources. The pseudepigrapha. You find Noah everywhere. So, what is special? Why does the Quran talk about Noah's story and tell the Arabs, "You and your people did not know it beforehand"? Why was what's the substance behind this assertion of the Quran? It's an obvious question, right? But you see, if we were to compare the stories of Noah in the Tanakh of in the Hebrew Tanakh, if we were to compare that and the Quran, it's very different the way the Quran brings information about Noah's story, the information of which you do not find in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Tanakh. I'm not particularly sure about the apocryphals or pseudepigraphas or other sorts of apocryphal works, or for example, the Book of Jubilees and stuff like that. I'm not sure how much it covers Noah's story and goes into what detail. You can let me know if you have parallels to how the Quran mentions the story, right? So you can help me if there's any parallels, and you can pull up the subs, the writings on your screen, and we can share that, and we can have a comparison, right? So here is the story. It comes in chapter 11 of the Quran, and here I'll just read the story for you, and we will see what the difference is. It's barely about um, yeah, barely about 25 verses. All right, so we'll just go through the story of Noah.
Yeah, read it.
We sent Noah to his people, and he declared, "Indeed, I am a clear warner to you, advising that you worship none but the true God, lest you face a day of severe punishment. The disbelieving leaders among the people responded, "We do not see anything special about you. You are just a human being like us, and we only see the lowliest among us following you, those who lack wisdom and judgment. We do not perceive any blessings or superiority in your presence. Rather, we strongly believe that you are a liar." Noah reminded them, "O my people, do you find it strange that I have clear evidence from my Lord and that he has bestowed upon me his mercy, and it is hidden from your eyes? How can I force you to believe when you are unwilling and disgusted? I do not ask for any material rewards for my preaching. My only reward is with God, and I will not drive away those who believe. They will surely meet their Lord. However, I see that you people are ignorant. Who will support me against God if I were to drive away those who believe? Will you not use your intellect and reason? I do not claim to possess the treasures of God, nor do I have knowledge of the unseen. I am not an angel, nor do I deny that God can bless those who you consider lowly with his provisions. God knows best your concerns, and I would never intend to commit any wrongdoing." They responded, "O Noah, you have argued with us extensively, and your arguments only lead to more disputes. If what you say is true, then bring upon us the punishment you have warned us about, unless you are lying." Noah replied, "The punishment will come upon you with the permission of God, and you cannot prevent it from happening. If God is contemplating to mislead you, my advice and counsel hold no benefit for you, though I desire. He is your Lord, and eventually to him you will return. O Noah, do they accuse you of fabricating lies? Say, if I have indeed fabricated lies, then the consequences of that falsehood will be upon me. I am innocent of your blasphemous acts." Then it was revealed to Noah, "None of the people will believe except those who have already believed. So do not be distressed because of their actions. Build the ark under our guidance and inspiration, and do not plead on behalf of the wrongdoers, for they are destined to be drowned." Accordingly, Noah started building the ark, and whenever the leaders of the people passed by, they ridiculed him for his endeavor. He said, "If you mock us now, we will mock you in the future, and you will come to know who will suffer humiliation and a lasting punishment." Finally, the command was given, and the earth's waters gushed forth. We instructed Noah, saying, "Embark the ark, pairs of every living creatures, along with your family, except those against whom the decree of the destruction has been issued, and take on board the believers who were only a few in number among the entire community." Noah instructed them, "Embark on the ark in the name of God, and it will sail and anchor according to his will. Surely my Lord forgives, harbors no grudge, and is merciful, abounding in steadfast love." The ark sailed with them on towering waves, and Noah called out to his son who was lagging behind, "O my son, come aboard with us and do not be among the disbelievers." His son replied, "I will take refuge on a mountain. It will protect me from the water." Noah said, "There is no protection today from the decree of God except for those upon whom he has mercy." And a wave came between them, separating the son from his father, and he was among the drowned. Then it was proclaimed, "O earth, swallow your water, and O sky, cease your rain." And the water subsided, and the decree was fulfilled. The ark came to rest upon Mount Judy, and it was proclaimed, "Away with the wrongdoers." Noah called upon his Lord, saying, "O my Lord, indeed my son is from my family, and your promise is true, and you are the most just of judges." The Lord responded, "O Noah, he is not of your family. Indeed, his conduct is unrighteous. So do not ask of me that about which you have no knowledge. I advise you, lest you be among the ignorant." Noah said, "O my Lord, I seek refuge in you from asking that of which I have no knowledge, and unless you forgive me and have mercy on me, I will be among the losers." God said, "O Noah, disembark with peace and blessings from us upon you and upon nations descending from those with you, and there will be provisions for them in this worldly life, but as for the ultimate punishment, I will inflict it upon each of them when the appointed time comes. O Muhammad, this is news of the unseen that we relay to you. You and your people did not know it beforehand, so be patient. The final outcome will be in favor of those mindful of God. So, in this story, there are some very specific details that are a I mean that sum up to be information contrary to the information found in the accounts of Genesis in the story of Noah. Right now, I'll go through them one by one. So what I mean to say is, if you if you read the gospel accounts of Noah, like if you read the Genesis accounts of Noah, there is a parallel to some of the mythologies in ancient Mesopotamia, for example, of the giants that were sired by angel beings having intercourses with human women. And the argument that comes in these accounts in Genesis as well as in ancient mythologies is, because of this union between angelic beings, heavenly beings, and human women who gave birth to giants, there was violence. And God was unhappy with the violence, so he destroyed the people. I mean, that's how the accounts appear, including the accounts given in the book of Genesis. But the story that the Quran brings to the table is, it has got nothing to do with angels copulating with human women to produce giants and hence cause violence or and disobedience of a different kind, but it is with human society at that time, which invented idol worship. If you read the Quran, it's very emphatic in letting humankind know that the people of Noah were among the first pioneers who invented idol worship in human society. So their blasphemous acts of worshipping idol caused Almighty God to send them a reminder about his unique might of him being the only God available in the cosmos, no other besides him. So that action of people of Noah, the blasphemous actions of people of Noah inventing idol worship, prompted Almighty God to send Noah to his people, reminding them of the worship of just one God. And that's where the arguments start. And people are arguing back and forth. People are telling, "Oh, Noah, why should we believe that God communicates to you? While we see only the lowliest among us who do not have intellect or wisdom." That's how they saw them, because they were lowly. They were not well off or anything like that. So they saw only these people are following you. So none of the well-to-do people follow you. So why should we believe that God communicates to you? And you're just a man like us. There's nothing special about you. And this argument, this conversation between the elites of Noah's society and Noah is captured in the Quran. I would be interested to see if any other apocrypha or even the Book of Jubilees, because I know for sure it's not captured in Genesis. So I'm interested to see if this story of the conversation between Noah and his elite about God is captured in any of the existing texts of that time. And moreover, the salient point that I would like to highlight is the reason why the Quran says to Prophet Muhammad, "O Muhammad, this is news of the unseen that we relay to you. You and your people did not know it beforehand," is for the reason that the Arabic tribes in Mecca, this is a Meccan surah, this is a Meccan chapter, the Arabic tribes in Mecca at that time had their own legends. They least cared about Israelite narrative. because there was some sort of animosity between the two the two brethren. Like, for example, Israelites were looking down upon the Arabs and did not consider them worthy of their uh, blood relationship. Like, they had common ancestors, but Israelites did not care about it. And even when they settled in around Arabia, around Mecca, they were boasting about their own um, success with being members of God's kingdom, while the Arabs being left out. So there was a certain degree of animosity. If you study history, you will know what I'm talking about. There was a certain degree of animosity between the Israelite tribes who had settled in and around Medina and the Arabs. There was this ambience of playing superior and inferiority complex, right, between the two people. Now, this is a Meccan surah. In Mecca, the Arabs were least bothered about the office of prophethood among the children of Jacob. They weren't worried about it. They had their own gods to deal with. They had invented their own tradition. They cared less about it. The story of Noah was not a common theme that they were talking about, or of Solomon, or of David, or of Moses. It wasn't really common to them, or even of Jesus. They had their own tradition in which they prided, right? Now Muhammad comes along and criticizes them and their worship, and it's intolerable for them. Like, they're like, "Oh, Muhammad, what are you doing? Do you want to criticize your own fathers and praise the Israelites? What is going on?" So the Meccans had the people in Mecca had difficulty with Muhammad for this exact reason, that he criticized his own tribes and fatherly legacy and started praising Moses, David, Solomon, all of these Hebrew prophets. So for it was unconscionable for Meccans at that time, and they were like, they did not know how to respond, basically. So God says, your people did not know about this. To Prophet Muhammad, he says, your people did not know about these things. So I'm telling you this. And when we get down to specifics, as I told you, in the Tanakh, you don't have this story in this great detail. I'm looking forward if you can allude to me other references such as the Book of Jubilees or the Book of Enoch, where this story comes in this great detail. The most important salient point that I would like to bring is this bit. Let me just share that here. Like just give me a moment before I share that. Okay. Okay. So what I want to share is this picture, like the Duru Pinar site, in the eastern regions of Turkey. Okay, this is where this feature in the mountain, which looks like an arc, it shows up some time ago, like half a century ago or something like that, when there was a series of earthquakes and a lot of rain caused the exposure of this feature on this Durupinar site. Okay. Now, there has been a significant attention by the scientific community based in the United States as well as in Turkey, who investigated the site for Noah's Ark. And it has also been 3D modeled by ultrasounds and stuff like that by the scientific community based in Turkey. Okay. Now, this site, the attention that I want to bring is about this site is particularly whether it is really Noah's Ark or not. That's a different issue. But because of the projections on the surface of the Earth, it's let us just analyze in favor of it. Let us just analyze, considering it to be Noah's Ark. Let us just analyze the site details, right? That's what I'm trying to do. The the most important feature is in Genesis, in the Genesis account, the site that Genesis talks about is Mount Ararat, which you can see as like having a snow cap on Google Maps here, Mount Ararat, right? So the Genesis account says Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. Okay. And if Prophet Muhammad was doing mimesis or he was imitating the accounts of ancient writings, whether it be from the Old Testament, Tanakh, the Hebrew Tanakh, or from other sources of his time, if he was imitating, he should have captured this information in the Quran, in the mountains of Ararat. Why would he necessarily deviate, which is
What
around
you said? What did you say it was called in Quran? Because I noticed that it was different.
Mount Judy, Mount Judy, okay, which is around, which is in the area of Dugu Bayazid. As you can see here on Google Maps, Dugu Bayazid is where the site of Duranpur is, like this particular site, Duranpur.
Okay.
And the locals call that mountain as Mount Judy. Okay. Now, if you see in the Google Maps, if you were to see the Google Maps and um, like just hang on, and the other day I was able to pull out an image which gave a very clear indication of the flows. You know, uh, I'm just trying to bring that again on the maps so that we can have a very clear idea of how the flow could have resulted, pushing the arc all the way down there. Okay, just bear with me to repin our site. That's different. I think I was looking at the okay. Nonetheless, I mean, I think I was looking at the 3D Google Earth. I think 3D Google Earth, just the 3D Google Earth. Mm.
where are you finding an indication that these mountain ranges down here are called the same as in the Quran?
So in the Quran, the verse comes here. The verse is 44. If you read 44, you'll get an idea of it. Then it was proclaimed, O earth, swallow your water, and O sky, cease your rain. And the water subsided, and the decree was fulfilled. The ark came to rest upon Mount Judy.
Like Judge Judy? You don't
Yeah,
know who Judge Judy is? That's right, do you? Judge Judy,
like
the lady.
like verse 44. It's called Jabal. It's called Jabal. Judy, Jabal Judy. So what I mean to say is the Quran could have just Prophet Muhammad could have just copied information about mountains of Ararat, which was very popularly known about Noah's Ark resting there in the mountains of Ararat. But he goes on to
Mhm.
pick and choose a destination further away from that with specificity of a name. Okay, now that's where the things are different in the Quran. Like for example, in the in the biblical account, the guy Satan, uh, Lucifer, or the devil, he's known as the fallen angel. But the Quran comes to clarify that. The Quran says he's not a fallen angel, but he is of the jinn. He's from the jinn kind. So things
Okay,
like
well,
that.
the fallen angel idea, that's Christian. That's
Mm,
specifically Christian. That's not in Judaism at all. Satan is not
mm,
seen as a fallen angel at all in Judaism. It's quite very different. He's more seen as God's ultimate right hand man. He does the work
right.
of he does the work of um, what's required so that we can have free will, so that there is such a thing as free will. Because if there is not that thing, then what we have isn't truly free will. We're just like robots. So that's the difference. Sorry, I
Yeah.
had to point that out. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The thing
That
is, the
you're
Quran
seeing
is
Satan in the Noah story.
no, 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 not in the Noah story. I'm just
Oh,
telling
okay.
you. I'm just telling you the construction of the Quran, whether
Right.
it was imitation or not. I'm just trying to build this narrative that it was not imitation, it was not mimesis of any kind that people could, loosely assume about the Quran, right? Now, look, even yesterday you commented, and I thought of bringing this to in front of you. You commented that the idea of seven heavens was pretty common, and I was wrong about it. What I have to say is, I was very specific about it. I was not wrong about it. I was very specific about it because the Judaism idea that comes in Talmud about the seven heavens is very different. It's like, as you see here, um, they talk about these realms where people, even Enoch talks about it. Enoch expands it to 10 heavens, where there is, there's um, reception. People are going in, people are coming out. Some sort of a passage or realm where people are being honored and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
that exact idea that existed in Judaism was copied in early Islamic tradition, right? The Wikipedia account here gives us gives a stark resemblance to the tradition of the Judaism, the Judaic tradition, and it copies something like this. This is what the tradition in Islam says: the seven heavens are. The first heaven um, is described as being made of water. And is the home of Adam and Eve, and as well as the angels. And the second heaven is described as being made of white pearls. and is the home of John the Baptist. The third heaven is described as made of iron, and the fourth heaven is described as being made of brass. This is mythology, all right? This is tradition. But the Quranic idea that I was talking about in that video yesterday with Stuart was a functional design of planet Earth. I was not making reference to these realms that people had wondered about, or um, or meditated about in their ignorance. I'm not talking about these realms. I'm talking about planet Earth and its functional sky design, which is very essential for the existence of planet Earth itself, right? So the Quran brings unique information, as Jesus himself said in the Gospels, when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he shall guide you into all the truth. And the Quran makes justice to that prophecy. The Quran, in every aspect, when it gives information, is making justice to that prophecy of Jesus Christ.
Okay, well, I have to ask you what it. The Quran actually talks about these seven heavens 6 or 7 times, probably 7 times. I think it does it. It very poetically does it 7 times. And the thing about it is, not one of these times does it give you some information that could that you could accomplish something with. For example, if I give you E equals MC squared, and you know what these variables stand for, you could do something with this. Or A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You can now build something with this bit of knowledge that I've given you. But with what is provided, what you're showing in the Quran, how do you see something there that is scientifically applicable? That it does not go into that kind of depth in the Quran. You have to put that onto the material for it to be there, because it's not there. It's just read one, bring one of those up. Let's bring one of those, one of the seven heavens passages, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You have to
Okay.
put stuff onto the material that's just not there. And what I'm telling you is that there aren't 7 layers to our earth or to our heavens or to our atmosphere or anything like that. You could say that there are, for example, here's an interesting thing about the seventh heavens, the 7 planets, is that we also have, and this could just be random, it's not, but we have 7 days in a week. There are also 7 notes in our, I don't know what you call this particular scale, but there are 7 notes before you jump to the next octave. There are, what was the other? There was another 7 that just popped into my head that is there are numerous things in nature that are related to this. The rainbow, that's what it was. The obvious distinctions in the rainbow are 7 colors. So there are, and that that I'll toss that back towards you and say you've got a potential for 7 heavens thing there, that's actually in our sky. But as far as science goes, there isn't a astronomer out there that's saying that we have these particular 7 layers to our what's around us, what's around the earth, or anything like that. And even further, if you go to the Quranic idea of 7 earths, there's not that either. You would have to get really like LSD trippy and it's it would have to be a trippy idea. That's all I'm saying. It's not what's going on in our regular um, existence. That's it's not what happened. It's
Now, let me just clarify that. The Quran does not talk about the seven earth idea, okay?
no, no, no. I
It's a
understand that.
mis
Yeah, yeah.
it's a misinterpretation, right?
Okay.
Or it's a wrong reading, I should say, right? But look at this verse 29. It's very clear in the Quran. He has created for you a well-developed ecosystem on earth. Then he attended to the design of the sky and perfected them as seven functional layers. So this is not seven here is not a number that God is using as a symbolic representation
Right.
of many different layers. Like for example, in the culture, in the Semitic culture at that time, 70 was such a number. Like for example, in the English culture today, we would say, I've told you hundreds of times, right? That hundreds of times is an idiom. It means many times. It may not accurately be 100, it may not even be 10, but the phrase hundreds of times, it's an idiom that shows I've told you enough, right? So such a number with the Semitic cultures at that time was 70, right? 70 was that number. But when God is talking about seven, and in this verse we can see him detail the seven as we perfected them as seven functional layers. So this is specific information.
Okay.
Now,
Well, if we take that right there, just that bit of information, we're talking about what's above us and seven functional layers. And if we were to take that to any astrophysicist, they would not associate that with anything. They would not go, "Oh, you're talking about blah 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 blah." So it's not something that is being discussed as scientifically valid. It's a claim that there are these seven functional layers, but there's not that's not what we're finding in science. That there are these seven functional layers, and were we to find seven things that we could pick and point out, how did we how did we come to this conclusion of these seven things as opposed to nine or 10 or something else? Um, what would you call these seven layers? I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. I'm going to give you the opportunity to explain why, because it's baffling to me. I'll be quiet. I'll let you talk.
if you, I mean, have you seen my debate with Hani on Derek's channel, Mythvision?
No,
I had a debate with Hani on Derek's channel, Mythvision, in which I basically presented content from my book, which is here, like Ancient Astronomy, and that's
mm,
where I'm showing corroborative evidence from the scientific community's research how well it tallies with what the Quran has to say on this concept. First of all, the Quran rescues the seven heavens as earthly heavens, required for the functional design of the earth to prevail, as opposed to mythical ideas of what those heavens are. Okay, first of all, the Quran makes a straight rescue, right? And this is where it is smart. It is getting smart here, right? It's not really copying the narrative that existed in ancient mythologies, but it's rescuing that concept. It says these seven functional skies are actually earthly skies that are very essential for the existence of the planet itself, right? And then it goes on to describe each one of those layers. Not just that, it describes even the origins of the exact sequence of those layers, which is like at that day and age, like man, it blows your mind off. Like to give the sequence, exact sequence of each one of these skies layers to emerge, it's non-human for that time, non-human. Even today, that's what I show, that's what I demonstrate in my book. Even today, scientists are not looking at this information in this way. They're still not paying heed. Okay, I happen to give this book to an astronomer here in UniSA, University of South Australia, and I'm still waiting for them to get back to me. I have given this book to the astronomers here in the Department of Astronomy in UniSA, right? I'm waiting for them to get back to me to have a further chat on.
I'm just not seeing a connection in what the Quran says to what we are actually observing. It's just it's a
Such as.
that's what I mean. Such as there is no we are not observing what the Quran is claiming, that there are these seven heavens. That's not what we are observing. The only way that we observe seven heavens as the Quran claims is to look at it in the view that the ancients looked at it, which is that these were the seven observable planets. And they were the ones that didn't wander. They're the ones that didn't stray. They're the ones that were always steady and they always knew where they were at. And that's just how the ancients looked at it, because they were so, I mean, I don't know how things are in Australia, but here in America over the past 100 years, with all of the smog and the city light, people don't look at the stars anymore, and they don't know them like they used to. Even 100 years ago, my ancestors here in Oklahoma, when there was no TV for them to watch at night, and when they were done with their work on the farm, they would go sit out and watch the stars and talk. And we just don't. It's not the same to us anymore, and so we come up with very strange things. And I think that's what I.
Okay, let me show you.
If you can,
Let me show you.
if you can actually associate these things, these seven heavens and their qualities, if you can somehow to associate these to what we are observing in science, that would be an argument. But you're not associating it to anything we're observing in science. I mean, let's
See,
start with the first heaven.
you
What
have
would you
to, you
call
have to, when you approach the Quran, you have to necessarily come out of the bias. If you don't, you will make the same mistakes as have been made in the Islamic tradition to just copy from the mythology that was existing at that time and describe those seven heavens as seven realms of the planets or whatever it is. But the Quran is just not buying that idea, even though you find its imprints as borrowed in the Islamic tradition, but the Quran is just not favoring that. When the Quran is talking about seven sky layers, it's very specific that it's talking about the earthly sky layers. You don't even have to go to a next planet. Forget about the stars. The Quran does talk about the starry firmaments. That's a different set. But when like in the verse that I showed you, in verse 29, when the Quran is talking about it, the Quran is talking about the creation and the origins of the earth. It says, He has created you for you a well developed ecosystem on earth. Then He attended to the design of the sky and perfected them as seven functional layers.
Okay,
Right?
so what's the first layer? What's layer number one above us? What's the first layer?
Okay, I'm showing you. I'm pulling that information in front of you. Okay, so in my book, I detail them. Okay, so the first layer, the first sky layer, you know, um, these are some of the descriptions of it. The first sky layer is homosphere, and the verses that describe it are like this: Are you a more difficult creation, or is the sky God built it? He raised its sphere and proportioned it, and He darkened its night and extracted from it brightness as day. Okay, so the Quran here is particularly focusing on homosphere, which refracts daylight. Okay, and if you're not sure, the idea is further built on additional references. Okay, such as this: direction of the winds and the clouds between the sky. Okay, and the birds that fly in this sky, atmosphere of this sky. So all of these references allude to one sky layer, which is the homosphere, in which the birds fly, in which there are clouds, which refracts the daylight, and which looks like a sphere in its makeup, like a powder puffed out, of a, like, a spherical powder puffed out. All of these descriptors allude you to homosphere.
I
Okay, this
wonder
is the
where they're
first.
getting. I wonder where how they're coming to this translate. I wonder what the actual Arabic word is. Actually, is what I'm trying to say, as opposed to
I have
homosphere
written this
being.
book. If you're not sure about it, I'm the author of this book, and I can give you all
What
those
word
details.
in the Quran? What is the actual word that they're saying? As
Like in
opposed to
for this particular verse, it says Jove. Jove is the atmosphere. Jove is the makeup of the air in the sky. The air in the sky is referred to as Jove in the language, in the Arabic language, right? And those additional references, I will give you those Arabic terminologies. I mean, it's here. Like for example, Jove is here, right? That's Jove
Mhm.
here, right? This sky is Jove. The other
And so
descriptors are
you're equating this to the atmosphere that the birds fly in.
right. That's what the Quran says.
Okay. Okay.
And here it says samkaha, samak here. The atmosphere isn't evenly spherically spread. I'm saying in the use of attributing suffixes such as sphere, as in atmosphere, is more to say that the figurative sense of sphere of influence. It is therefore interpreted as the spherical boundary of not just the atmosphere but the overarching spherical influence of planet Earth's magnetic field. The Arabic word samkaha is best used to describe the shape of the Earth's sky as a boundary region akin to a powder puffed up. That's the word. A powder puffed up is what samak means, right? So the the details are mind blowing. The kind of terminology the Quran uses even to describe the shape of the sky, homospheric sky, it's amazing. It uses samakaha. It says the sky layer's shape is like a samak, powder puffed up. And the details, like it details it. And he darkens its night and extracts from it brightness as day. So now we know that Jove, the atmospheric particles, the air particles, they refract the daylight and it lightens up because they refract the sunlight. So the Quran uses extraction. Akhraja, the Quran says, Akhraja duhaha. I'm extracting the daylight. So it's very, very detailed. It's very specific. It's very technical. It's very scientific the way it brings its descriptors to describe the phenomenon, right? So this is just the first sky, okay? Homosphere, the first sky. Let's go to the second sky, okay? Now what we saw the first sky, the boundary of that sky is the flight path, beyond which flight is not facilitated is the second sky, is the beginning of the second sky, right? Okay. So where aeronautics ends, we call it the Karman line. The Karman line is where aeronautics ends and rocketry begins, right? Because the aerofoil does not work beyond the Karman line. So you need rocket power, no rocket engine to propel you. So this sky layer is in the Quran comes as heterosphere, where there is plasma, the beginning of plasma, right? The plasma layers of the skies.
Where are you getting that in the Quran, though?
So the Quran verse 52, 5 and 6,
Mm.
the Quran says, and by the roof raised high, and by this filtering ocean. So the Quran describes the emergence, the origins of this sky layer by the phenomenon of sweltering oceans. When the earth was still forming, the water in the oceans were boiled up and raised a lot of plasma, and that plasma built plasma sphere. So the association that the Quran brings to this sky layer is with these filtering oceans, and it calls it wasaqafil marfu, the raised roof. And we know the plasma sphere is a savior to life on earth. The plasma sphere keeps the sun's wrath away from the earth, right? That's the second sky layer. And the third sky layer is the magnetosphere. And it's dramatic. The way the Quran brings this information out is dramatic. And the verses that you need to go and look into is 41 verses 11 and 12, where the this layer, sky layer, magnetosphere, is described in the following way. God says, then he directed towards the sky while it was smoke, and this is homosphere. Okay, the smoke layer of the sky was became homosphere, right? At that time, when the homosphere was still in the format of smoke engulfing planet Earth, God says, I directed towards the sky while it was smoke and said to it and to the earth. Now, there are two entities. One is the smoky sky and the earth, two different entities. God says, come into formation willingly or by compulsion. They said, we come willingly. Thus he completed them as 7 skies in 2 days and engineered for each sky its role. Okay? So it's very clear. The Quran is describing the events of the formation of the planet Earth and its skies in very specific details. The Quran says the earth responded to God's command and engulfed the smoky blanket with a sky layer, and that is magnetosphere. The earth responds to engulf it, and that layer engulfs and retains the smoky blanket as its homosphere. Okay, now you see the information in the following verse. God says, with this response of the earth I generated 7 sky layers, right? That's what the Quran says, and assigned each sky layer its role. Okay, and if you can see this figure, this is how the earth building, the planet earth building really happened. The phase 1 is earth building, like the earth itself did not exist before. The material was gathered in 2 periods of time, and in the third period the first set of skies were built, and in the 6th period the second set of skies were built, and the second phase of the earth building lasted for 4 periods. Okay, I mean, you can get into the details of all of this if you would want to read my book. But yeah, moving forward, the 4th sky, the Quran has a description for the ozone sky layer. So it says, he who made for you the earth as a couch and the sky as a canopy. And this sky as a canopy, Quran says, has come about to protect life on earth and sent down water from the sky and brought forth therewith fruits and provisions for you. And and in other places it describes God created animals and stuff like that after having the sky, higher mammals, of course, higher mammals after having this sky layer, right? So, like in this verse 40:64, it is God who has made for you earth as a place of settlement and the sky as a cover of canopy. The descriptors the Quran uses here is bina, like as in building, bina, for this canopy, and dresses up you in best of forms and provisions for you with good organic things. Okay, like this sky layer is specifically associated with protection for life forms on earth. Okay, and the Quran talks about even the arrangement of these skies. It just doesn't talk about each of these sky layers and its roles. It talks about its sequence of origin, and it also talks about its architecture. The Quran says it is God who created seven skies in overlapped layers. I mean, that is a very specific detail. Very, very specific. You can't escape it. Even the scientific community who read this, they can't escape it. Like the ozone is embedded within the homosphere. The homosphere is embedded within the heterosphere. The ionosphere and the radiation belts are embedded within the heterosphere. And the magnetosphere encapsulates the whole of it. I mean, it's
Okay,
amazing. The way the
what
Quran brings
what you're
information is
doing is
amazing.
you're making you're making the entire claim unfalsifiable by there being no distinction among these things. And I think that as as I'm listening to it, I am not hearing in each of these things. I'm not hearing something that sounds like um, it. It just does not sound like what we are observing in science. It's not the same. There was a lady who in the 80s became very, very wealthy. Her name was Miss Cleo because she had the ability to say things to people that they thought were very intuitive, or it was really about them, and she was just very clever. And I can't,
I take that on board. You're telling me that I'm very clever. I take that on
I
board
no,
with a smile.
I'm saying that the this has been written um, in such a way that and the same holds true with prophets like Ezekiel or Isaiah. They have been written in such a way that people throughout time have applied it as they have seen fit, and it's been very easy for them to do because it's just written very mystically. And 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 as you're reading it to me, what I am hearing are very similar to what I find in, for example, the Book of Enoch. And you asked me earlier about and Noah in particular, but the same thing holds true here, which is cosmology, because the Book of Enoch very much goes into strange and crazy cosmology. And there are people that think the Book of Enoch is, a holy book, and they've got their calendar going according to Enoch's calendar and all this stuff. But um, they're seeing that stuff in there, and they're saying, this could only be if Enoch had actually gone to see God and what have you. And all of it to me is like Kabbalah, like Jewish mysticism. And I'm not I'm not saying that there's not anything there. I just If it is, I it's not
I
jumping
think
out
you're
at me.
just having difficulty. I think you're just having difficulty. If you have seen my Enoch video, I give I lay a premise which the atheists and agnostics, such as Mythvision, people at Mythvision, are having difficulty grappling with. They are like, how can these accounts, some of these accounts, be even found in the book of Enoch? The fact is, the premise is God has been communicating to ancient civilizations. Arabs happen to be just the last of those who received God's communication. The Israelites happen to be just in the trailing nations. They happen to be one of those nations whom God communicated. But prior to Israelites, prior to Abraham, God has communicated to a lot of different people, a lot of different nations, including Indians, the Vedas, okay? The book of Enoch. Enoch is even a prophet in the Quran, Idris. God communicated to Enoch. Like Enoch was a prophet sent to Sumer, right? According to the Quran. So
Mm.
God has been communicating to a lot of different people before Abraham, prior to Abraham. So can this information be in those books? Yes, of course. It's possible. Okay? But this information that I just shared with you, the specifics, the technicality, the details, the scientific details, I would be interested to see if they're found in the book of Enoch, and I would be glad if they're found, right? I would be glad because when God communicates to people, He communicates those exact details every time. But it's people who, like the Jews, in the Talmud, they talked about these seven heavens because in the Tanakh they had seven heaven concept introduced to them, and they come up with this association by their own understanding, and they go wrong, and they talk about these realms as planets, or maybe these realms are decorated with iron or bronze or pearls or whatever it is. This is human interpretation. This is mythologizing the original concepts. So the Quran comes according to Christ. When the Spirit of truth shall come, He shall guide you into all the truth. The Quran just does justice to that statement. The Quran comes and gives you these specific details. It tells these seven realms is not of some planetary or other things. These are in relation to our own planet, and these are the technical details of these sky layers.
Well,
I mean, if you
let me let me ask you this. This is a very
yeah,
important question. Let's say that this is um, special knowledge from God. What can you do with it?
sorry,
What
what
can
can I
you
do
do
with
with
it?
it? What
It's a
can you do with
proof.
it?
God says, look, I am the one who created it.
It's not what it's not a proof. What can you do with it? How can you make this world better with it? Can you do anything? Can you feed your kids with it or anything?
Well, if you heed to God's message, you can. God says, my religion that I communicate to you is for your own betterment. All right. If you want to improve the human world, you look at those passages in the Quran where Quran talks about justice, fairness, compassion, equality. It talks about doing good. It talks about human element, empathy, sharing. According to
Right,
the
but
according to the
those are
teachings
different
given to his
things.
prophets,
We're talking about the heavens thing now. The knowledge of those seven heavens isn't something that's actually useful. Those other things are taking
it
care of a
could be
widow.
useful. It could be useful. It could be useful. In the
How
Quran, God talks about special providences that he gave to Solomon. Solomon had the technology to teleport. Okay, the verses, the passages are in the Quran. Solomon had the technology to teleport things. Okay,
see, this is Kabbalah. This is all like Kabbalah tradition.
you could say that because when you don't understand, you could say that, right? But teleportation,
No, I mean
scientists
they tell
today
you
are talking about
specifically.
it.
They tell you
Scientists are in
specifically how to do
pursuit
it.
of such technology.
Uh-huh.
If it was Kabbalah, if it was Kabbalah unworthy, scientists would not be making any research in that direction. Why do you think the scientific community is involved in um, researching those fields? Why?
Kabbalah.
Teleportation, why? Like,
I'm
fine,
telling you
whatever
that
it is. I mean, even if it is Kabbalah, whatever it is. But what I'm
Kabbalah.
saying is, God says in the Quran that Solomon had that technology. And that could be through one of these skies, having an understanding of these skies, how the skies function. It could be. I'm not sure. It could be. But it is essential. The reason why the Quran talks about the seven skies is fundamental. It's fundamental to it being the burhan. The Quran says, Burhanum min rabbikum. My communication is the proof that your Lord exists. And your Lord has done these things. And your Lord has created the heavens and the earth, skies and the earth. And this is how He created it. He made them in 6 periods. And this is what happened on the first period, second period, third period, fourth period, fifth period, sixth period. This is how it did it. The architecture of the skies is overlapped architecture. Who could say that? Overlapping
Anybody,
architecture. This is in
anybody,
the
I'm
Quran.
sorry,
That's just the word.
anybody could say that. Anybody could
Okay.
say that.
Okay, fine. But let's move on. Let's move on. The fifth sky, right? The Quran talks about ionosphere. It says, by the sky that rebounds. Okay, that's a very specific descriptor. Raja'i, the sky that rebounds. Okay, it talks about ionosphere in this regard. And the sixth sky, it talks about the radiation belts. It says very uniquely. It says saqafam mahfuza, a protected ceiling, a protected ceiling. And Quran says this is the last of the sky layers that God created, a protective ceiling, saqafam mahfuza. Okay, and this and the seventh sky layer, God talks about it as the gravity sky, right? So the
The what?
descriptor there, the gravity sky, yeah,
Gravity sky?
yeah.
Okay, where? How would you get a word like gravity in Arabic in 600 AD?
Yeah,
That's
the descriptor
that's bizarre.
the descriptor is mizan. When the Quran talks about this particular sky, the Quran says this sky has mizan in it. All right, a very very unique descriptor, very unique. It says, and the sky God has raised and imposed mizan, which is balance, such that you won't trespass the balance, and that you establish weight dispensing justice, and that you lose not on the use of this balance. The Arabic word mizan, translated as balance, like you got to read into it. You got to read into it to have a sense of understanding. Obviously, the word gravity, look, gravity is a modern word. I mean, everybody understands that. But I'm using it. Now you could say, oh, you're trying to make use of these terms to depict something that does not exist in the Quran. Okay, that could be a very
Let's if I were going to go with you and assume that this seventh layer that he's described it correctly, then I would have to say that gravity is a bad word to use altogether, and you should have, like, whoever was the translator should have chosen a different word.
I'm the translator. That argument could be a very salient argument, and I would even love to consider that, right? For example, right? But in my current understanding, of how I'm describing things, I am feeling justified to use the word in a way, right? Because when you read information like this, which I'm trying to share now, hang on, okay, like information like this, it says, "O communities of jinn and men, if you can pass to the boundary regions of the skies and of the earth, then pass. You will not so pass except by permission of God. So which of the favors of your Lord would you deny? Upon you be sent space objects of a firebrand and of smoke, and you would be defended. So which of the favors of your Lord would you deny? All right. So this is basically talking about the usage of this sky layer imposed with balance to be around the earth in that realm, using this sky to hang on there in space, right? So basically, there is the concrete idea. Okay, there's a concrete idea. The Quran talks about, when it talks about mizan in this sky, it talks about the balance the sky comes up with that people and the jinn can use to launch their space explorations and be hanging out there around the earth in its exteriors. So look, you may conjecture it for some time, but if you keep reading these passages, you have to concede to the fact that Quran has an aimed reference for all of these sky layers, and each one of those sky layers are being enamored with further details like this one. When the Quran talks about the gravity sky, it talks about men and jinn launching their space explorations. Like, this is 7th century, man. Nobody was thinking about having a space exploration back then. Like,
I think that, well, yeah, they definitely were. But I think that what we are going to find out if I actually start reading these, I think that what I'm going to be able to do is identify the sources of these. They're not something that the heavens and the sources for the Quranic version of these aren't something I've looked into before. But I think that I am going to be able to find.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And that'll be the day we can knock on Derek's channel, to have a debate on his channel. We can say, Mythvision, hello, somebody has found the mimesis, for Quran, and do you want to host our program? So we can knock on Derek and say, buddy, come on. We are talking about how Quran, has some mimesis going on with it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that day.
I think Derek's making a lot of money right now off his classes that he's doing that he's offering with particular scholars. That's probably, I imagine that's what motivates him right now.
Well,
he's
I
making a
think
living.
Derek would be open to host anybody who has a sharp spear against the Quran. I think he's just looking forward to that day when people come up and try to expose the Quran. He will be happy. He will be on top of his spirits to host you if you could do that. If you could figure out the sources where the Quran has mimesis going on in this particular area, I think he will be delighted to host you, and I will be happy to come and talk about it on Mythvision.
I've watched a couple of his episodes that he has done addressing Islam or the Quran, but I get the feeling, and because Derek is very, I don't know if you've recognized this, he's very leftist now. He's become very liberal. He's very, uh, what's the word? Tries to be over accommodating to those who he feels are minority or oppressed or something like this. Do you understand what I mean?
I do understand that.
And
I do understand that, but at the core of his
I,
project is to
I don't think he
discredit.
can
No, at the core of his project is to discredit the biblical, basically the Abrahamic narrative. He wants to discredit it. He wants to show that's just mythologies, just
sure, but
copied stuff over and over again.
I think in his mind to destroy Islam is even lower on the totem pole, for example, than to
I don't think
destroy
so. I think it's high on his
Calvinism.
agenda. He's just not finding the right people. He's just not finding There's just no headway to assault the Quran. You know why? The Quran says itself, there's a phrase it uses, it says, لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ومن خلفه. Falsehood does not or cannot approach the Quran from any direction. There is no angle of attack left for the Quran because the Quran is the communication from God verbatim, verbatim word of God. So Derek will be happy, more than happy that you can ever imagine if you were to come up with the arsenal, the right arsenal to kill the Quran and to expose it. He would be happy on top of his spirits to host you. And I would like to see that day.
I'm I'm not sure he would be that happy about it. He's
He will definitely be happy. I will get in touch with him. I will get in touch with him. I'll say, here is a guy with a claim that he can really expose the Quran for mimesis on this particular subject of the skies. He has done his research. He has gotten the sources right. So why don't you host this debate and we'll talk on his channel. Or if he doesn't allow, we can talk on my channel. You're most
what do
welcome.
you think an angel is in the context of the biblical context? What do you think an angel is? What does it sound like to you? Malak. It's called Malak.
Malak, like I cannot really talk excluding the Quran on this concept. The whole angel idea from in the history of humanity, like even in India, you have references to those angelic beings. In Indian mythologies, you have references to those angelic beings. So the angel basically is an elusive being, sort of a robotic creature created by God. Like it has sort of free will, but it is not like human being who would want to be independent. It is very robotic to the instructions God gives it.
Okay, so I think if you look at not only beginning with Genesis, the biblical narrative, but also the other, well, the Gospels or any other Hebrew writings about angels, if you look at the account of Abraham, for example, when the three angels approach him, one of which actually turns out to be God, he feeds them and they eat and they sit there and talk with him, and they're physical beings that he is conversing with, and he is treating them as though they are angels. And then once there is only one, he is treating this one and speaking to him as though he's God. And what I find interesting about the story of the Quran and how Muhammad received it is that he was in a cave and the angel Gabriel came to him and squeezed him, physically squeezed him. So this isn't a ghost or some kind of spirit. This is a physical being that squeezed him and said, read. And he said, I can't read. And he did it again. So the fact that he does it 3 times, demanding him to read, in my mind, tells me this person that's doing the angel Gabriel is a person who doesn't have full knowledge that Muhammad can't read, and he's demanding something of him that he can't accomplish. And so he says, well, fine, then you've got to memorize this. If you can't read it, I'm going to recite it and you're going to memorize it. Am I right about the narrative basically there?
You are right about the Islamic traditional narrative, and you are wrong about your own um, understanding of that. How understanding that story? Okay, but according to me, the tradition, the way you described, is not accurate. Okay, the way you describe is not accurate. The physical squeezing did not take place, according to my readings. Okay,
Okay.
according to my readings, Muhammad in that encounter with the angel, saw the angel in the horizon, and everywhere he looked, he just saw the angel, and he was terrified. And what happens if a man gets terrified to that extent? You start choking, right? I mean, you can't basically have a normal conversation in that scenario when you're afraid of afraid of you're basically being spooked by this angelic presence, and you've seen nothing like it before. Basically, you choked, and the angel says, "Read," and Muhammad says, he responds, "Ma ana biqari." That's the tradition, right? Ma ana biqari. But that's fine. But that's not the assumption that Muhammad cannot read. That's not the assumption that the angel need not come with this assumption that Muhammad cannot read. The angel is right there to teach Muhammad, right? So the angel's commands, read after me. Just use your tongue to repeat after me. And Muhammad says, no, I'm not this guy who's into literature, right? The angel insists, read, and it happens. The process is infused, and Muhammad begins to trace those words given by the angel. That's about it. Um, it was not a physical embrace and squeezing Muhammad's body. It was not that. It was this phenomenon that he saw at the horizon unfolding right in front of his eyes. It was terrified him, and the communication made by the angel was his natural response. Like as a man, if a force like that from the horizon commands you, and you would respond like, okay, I'm not this guy who's into books and who's into the literature and stuff like that. But the angel presses on, says, read, and you try to follow the angel, and that's what happens.
I think you have a different translation than the one that I have. I need to pull out my translation again and have a look. I've got one in the other room that the American Islamic something society sent me years ago, many years ago.
Sure.
But I've definitely read that. I've definitely read that portion, and like I said, when I read it, that's how it came off to me, as though if I didn't, if it were not being, if I didn't already have an angelic idea about who he was communicating with, it would just be a mysterious guy who had showed up to be a messenger and deliver him some information, and he got this information. And because after this guy has done his job, he disappears. He becomes a mysterious angelic being. He's that's why when you were earlier describing the qualities of an angel being like a kind of somewhat robotic, he's only there to do his job or whatever. That's the only time that we see them presented in the biblical tradition, is when they are doing their job. We don't ever see them presented when they're having to bite a yogurt or when they've got to run off to the John. That's not ever part of their story.
See, according to the Qur'an, the angels are intelligent beings. They have their own intelligence, right? They are intelligent beings, no doubt about that. But when it comes to obedience, they are immaculate in obeying God. They're immaculate. They're not like human beings who obey and disobey and obey and disobey and seek repentance. They're not like us. They're immaculate in obedience to God. Now, see the story that comes in the Quran about Mary. The same angel Gabriel comes to her in a human form, and he manifests to Mary in a human form. Okay, that also happened to Prophet Muhammad in the tradition. Okay, and some of those stories are true. I believe those stories to be true. The angel Gabriel appears to Mary in a human form and gives her the good news. It's in the Quran, okay? And these visits, these angels' visits, like for example, you can argue about what you can ask me, what do you think about that fight that happened with Jacob and the angel, and Jacob ends up defeating that, right? If that being was God or angel or whatever it is, I consider that to be a fable. That part of the story in the book of Genesis to be a fable. That fight between God and Jacob, or an angel and Jacob, is just a fable. There were angels who visited Abraham, and they gave him the good news and gave him the news of the destruction of Lot's people, Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham had an argument with, with the angels, arguing on behalf of the people of Lot. But the angels informed Abraham, "No, Abraham, God has made his decision. We are here to do this job, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah," right? And even when those angels visit Lot, the homosexuals in that town at that time, they saw these beautiful looking men, strangers to their town, as the opportunity to have their lusts fulfilled with them. So they approached Lot's house because they wanted these men. So Lot kept telling them, spare my guests. They are my guests. Don't dishonor me. If you want to do, if I have my daughters, I would like to wed you my daughters. They are made to you. They are made as natural partners to you by God. You know that's where you should have your desires fulfilled, not with men. You know what I mean? But the men who were angels, they informed Lot, "Don't worry about these guys. They have lost their minds completely. You go away, you leave this town, and by the morning, that's their time, we are going to destroy these towns." So angels do have shown, angels have shown up to people as people in human format, humanizing as humans, like angels humanizing as humans. They have visited, they have had visitations. The passages are very clear in the Quran. Gabriel visited Mary in a human form. It's very clear. Um, there's no ambiguity of any sort there. It's very clear, right? Prophet Muhammad himself, he saw Angel Gabriel in his actual format, and that's on the first interaction and on the second interaction. So he saw him in his actual format twice, and of course, according to the tradition, once Gabriel visited as a man to Muhammad and his companions to teach them the essence of what the religion of Islam really was. So this is what it is. The Quran, it's far from being mimesis, and I'm looking forward to the day you or Dennis MacDonald. I'm banking on Dennis MacDonald. I even offered him. I sent him an email to Dennis stating I would like to help him in the story of Dhul Qarnayn, the Alexander the Great story. And I said, please do some work in this regard to expose the Quran for mimesis. Because I read Josephus, and the way Josephus narrates the story of Dhul Qarnayn, and the way the Quran does it, oh my God, it is seductive. It is mesmerizing the way the Quran does this story. It's like non-human. The way the Quran does this story is non-human. I offered Derek to come on his show and talk about this when he offered me to talk about it, but then he I was too much for Derek. My constant commenting on his Facebook and stuff like that has led him um, to to block me. Basically, he's blockaded me from his Facebook. Okay, I don't know why people do this, but I believe Derek is a strong man. He shouldn't be doing that. Ideally speaking, I wouldn't do that to anybody for that matter, right? I wouldn't block anybody who's passing comments, who's commenting on my content. I wouldn't block it. I wouldn't block anybody for that matter, right? I don't know why people do this, and I was not thinking that Derek would do this, but he's did it. All right, but that's fine. Still, I consider him as a good man because I love him. Because I see so much energy that he brings to his mission, to his project. I see myself in him, to be honest, dead honest. There's no second thoughts, right? I respect the guy, and I believe one day when he finds substance against the Quran, he will knock my door for sure. Because he's seen my challenges, he's seen what I am bringing to the table, and he's seeing himself at the moment unable to defend or unable to assault the Quran in front of my arguments. So he's just waiting for the day to be helped by people like yourself or people like Dennis MacDonald. When they will have substance against the Quran, he will surely knock my door. And my challenge is my challenge is big. Like
Well,
I'm not going anywhere.
let me ask you something.
Mm.
If it's and Alexander the Great is an excellent example. If someone shows you examples of all of these stories coming from other sources, does that change anything for you, or is your position still the same?
Look, all of these stories
Because what I'm
have
suggesting to you is that Muhammad
sure.
didn't make these things up. I think that he did get them from um, a messenger. Someone brought him these stories, and he
Okay.
delivered them, as true as he learned them. And the reason that we are finding them is in other places is because the angel Gabriel has also got them from other places. I mean, that's uh,
Why wouldn't the angel Gabriel get it from God? Why would he go to other places to get it?
because that isn't how God God delivers messages. That's just not how it works. It doesn't. It it's not. Those aren't the kind of things God tells people. Like how many heavens there are, or
You should start
even
using the word sky instead of heaven, because heaven is a word that's used in a very metaphorical way. It's a metaphorical
well,
heaven,
heaven. I
right?
mean, it's the
So
same
use the
word
word
like
sky. Use the word sky. It's more appropriate in the Quranic language. It's more appropriate because sky is are the entities. Seven skies are the entities, the
yeah.
layers that
Well,
God talks about to be around planet Earth.
in the context of like the biblical account of creation, the sky and the heaven, it's the same word. There's no other word. There's just one
Yeah, but
combined.
heaven, the word heaven
Yeah.
has so much to it now. Over the years of time, over the centuries, the heaven
Yeah.
has become some sort of a palace, right? Some sort of a
So
palace where nobles are treated. That's how heavens have become. So I'm more inclined to be using the word sky when I'm talking about planet Earth and its seven skies that make it a functional design. I'm talking about like a very a word that people can relate to, rather than heaven, which is mysterious and some sort of a royal firmament where royals are treated, whatever it is. Sky is much more suitable to be used.
well, I'm going to this week have a look over um, some of these other sources and um, kind of compare them against what you've shown me
Sure,
today.
sure.
Um,
Keep in mind, you got to always bear in mind that God has communicated to ancient societies, to Enoch,
well,
Saint Sumer, to the Vedic societies, to
the
Noah.
my operating assumption is that he does this to everyone, not to Noah or to this person or to that person, but every single person. That is my operating assumption based on
No,
what
that's
I.
that is for sure. That is there. That is there. I'm not saying that's not the case. What I'm saying is when it comes to giving them scriptures, those are specific individuals.
Scriptures
Muhammad
are
received the scriptures
what?
he received. Moses received the words he received. Jesus received the teachings he received. Can you find parallels to the parables of Christ?
Yes,
Can you? The
yes.
the parallels to the parables of Christ. Can you find
Yes.
them?
Yes.
Okay, I would be interested to do that. I would be
And
in our next
Thessalonians
meeting.
three.
You bring out those parallels to the teachings of Christ. I would be interested to see those parallels. Dennis MacDonald has not done it. Dennis MacDonald has not done it. He's only criticizing the birth and resurrection narrative. That's where he sees mimesis in the story of Christ. He's not even touching the teachings of Jesus Christ. He's not doing that. Dennis MacDonald is not doing that. So you're saying a big say. So I'm looking forward to to you bringing up, showing me those parallels to the teachings given by Christ. Next week, we'll do this next week. Shall we call it a day? Shall we end it here?
Yeah, I'm tired.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
Anyway,
it's nice. It's nice to chat to you, Trey Bishop, and everybody who are watching us. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next week, next episode. Until then, bye.
you know.